There we go. Yay! Well, hello and welcome in, everybody. I'm so excited. We are doing this episode chatting with Crimson Minx, my favorite person in the whole world, and my witchy mom. And this episode is way so incredibly long overdue, and I'm just so excited. I mean, purely selfishly, that we get to hang out here for an hour. So thank you so much for being here.
I agree. It's such a pleasure to finally be on the podcast after being a sponsor for so long and after having you on my podcast. So well overdue. And I love the Real Ghost of community who I've been able to meet out in the real world. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Well, I'm so excited because I mean, obviously, everybody's been hearing me for like literal years at this point, try to spread the gospel of Minx and Muse. Um, so I'm really excited that now we can finally give people an in-depth look into things. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the dark feminine, esoeroticism, I first want to ask you, because I'm a big fan of like tangible things, and I know with all of the work you do, obviously as witches, and with what I do, mediumship, and people who are honing their abilities, intuitive, we like to connect with spirits. So I am curious if you can start us off by giving us some ways that you use all of this work, the esoeroticism, dark feminine, in your workings and in working with spirit and communicating with spirits.
Right. So, well, first and foremost, esoeroticism, we use that word a lot, but most people are probably unfamiliar with it and unaware of what it means. So, with esoeroticism, it is essentially a combination of the words esoteric and erotic. So, erotic is our sensuality and our sexuality, and esoteric, the more hidden or internal. And so eso, the prefix internal. So it is a way for us to connect with this internal sexual energy, life force, creativity, vitality that we hold. And quite simply, we always say esoeroticism is a way to access our sexual energy outside of intercourse. So very self-sourced. And dance and movement is how we access this energy, and witchcraft is how we harness it. And so when it comes to specifically the work that you do through your paranormal workings, when it comes to eroticism, for me, the most powerful support that it can offer is guiding people into their bodies and into a more distinct connection with their intuition. And so we talk about this at the studio of how even if you were naturally psychic or a medium or gifted in this way, it doesn't mean, and I'm sure you were well aware of this, not every message that comes through or not every connection that you make is for your highest good or trustworthy. And so when we are devoid of our intuition, essentially we don't have that inner compass to guide us towards what should we trust? How can we engage in the spirit world in a like conscious and responsible and self-protective way? And it also, obviously, once you are embodied, are intuitive, you are going to also be able to connect more deeply to the subtle energies of the spirit world. So for a really practical answer to your question that is very long-winded, a lot of times people want to do this spirit world connection and workings from the mind. And if you're operating solely from the mind, you are missing out on a lot of messaging, and you can also be bamboozled. If you're able to integrate the body into your spirit workings, not only are you going to be able to have more intuitive guidance into like what you can trust and not trust, but you're going to be more connected to the subtle energies, because a lot of that is not going to be triggered in the mind, but it is going to be in the somatic feeling body. So do you have any experience?
Um, I love that a lot, and I think that that is something, especially when we're talking about connecting with spirit, developing these abilities or mediumship. Not many people bring this point up. And like for me, okay, Libra, I'm an air sign. I typically am very ungrounded and always, I'm like, I just want to live in like other realms, I don't want to be on Earth, period. But here we are. And yeah, actually, when I first started doing my development, um we all know and love Sarah. She's like my medium mom, and she told me that I need to start practicing with a rock, like holding a rock. And so I literally have, it's not in front of me right now, but this like big rock that I got from outside my house, that when I was doing any sort of development or meditation or trying to tap into spirit or readings, anything like that, I literally like have to sit with this rock in my lap just as a further like trying to help me ground myself in. But also, yes, as somebody who does go to the studio, and yeah, we were literally like dancing together yesterday. It really is, it's so interesting to me how quickly doing this work and the dance classes, it really just like immediately brings me back into my body. And I feel like because I live so much like outside of it, if you will, it it can be hard for me to even notice, like, when I'm not in my body or fully present, right? Because I'm so used to just, like, being, I don't know, anywhere else.
Yeah.
Um, so when I come into the studio and we get into class and we're doing the exercises and even just the warming up, it, like, immediately just brings you back in, which is, such a nice feeling, actually.
Right, and here's the thing, so many people in the paranormal world are, living in the ethers, living outside of their body, and
Yeah.
if you don't have an embodied connection to yourself, you're not gonna recognize what energy is yours and what belongs to something else, and so having an embodiment practice where you're not just clear on your thoughts, but you're also clear on your own energy, the more you do this kind of work, the more that you start to realize this is my energetic set state. This is what I'm feeling right now is mine. What and when you're feeling off kiltered, especially if you're doing investigations, obviously you could pick up energies. And just as non investigative people, we pick up energies throughout our day, and you can start to recognize, oh, that's not mine. That doesn't belong to me. And you can do the proper cleansing techniques, and you can do, if it's, or if you do need to see even someone with more like heightened clearing abilities, whatever. But it's really important to be able to know like what your set state is and what your energetic self is, which again is not a thinking, it's a feeling. And so many people really believe that it's the logical masculine thinking mind that is of most importance and that is going to be our ultimate guide, when truly it is a balance of both, right? But to dismiss anything that is intuitive or feeling or connected to an energetic or emotional self as being less than is really, I think, detrimental to not just like one's spiritual health, but also their spiritual pursuits. Because you mentioned grounding before. If you're not grounded and you're going in and you're working in the spirit world, again, you can kind of get lost in that space, or you can have parts of yourself siphoned energetically. Like it's very important to have like a sovereignty in your body and your energy to be able to protect you in doing this work. And even, when we do spiritual work, we always think, I want to open the third eye, I want to open the crown chakra. But here's the truth. If you're not able to then pull that energy down into your body and root it down into your lower energy centers, your lower chakras, or whatever energy centers you work with, you're never going to be able to actually integrate your spiritual work with your earthly existence. And so many people are like, oh my gosh, I'm doing all of this like beautiful, powerful spiritual work, and I'm opening the crown and the third eye, and I have all of this, but why is my earthly life a mess? Well, because you're not being able, it could be because your lower energy centers are blocked, are filled with old energies, emotions, or the energy and emotions of others. It's closed off, and so you can't actually translate it to the terrestrial, which is like why we're here as humans, right? To be able to alchemize the spirit with the earthly.
Yes. Oh my God, I love all of that. And I feel like that also ties perfectly into, like, we're talking specifically about those lower energy centers, right? Which also is another reason why dance and utilizing dance for this works so well, because when you look at like the somatic aspects of things, right, we store so much in there. So I'm curious if you can talk a little bit more about that and how that's kind of integrated, because I feel like not many people are aware of those things, but it holds so much power.
Right, because here's the thing, you can go jogging and you can lift weights and do things like that, and I'm all for caring for the holistic physical self. But there's something about the esoeroticism that makes it unique, in that we are specifically focused on those hips and that's sacral chakra energy center. There's a lot of circles and undulations and serpentine sexually expressed kind of movement. And it's that movement specifically, not just movement in general, that is focused on and working with that very specific energy center, which is, as you said, it is the lower part, it's the root, it's the sacral energy centers, it's the lower dantian in Chinese medicine, it's the hata energy center in Japanese. Across cultures, they all recognize that this area specifically in our bodies is a powerful access point. It is from this energetic place where we create. So whether that is where we birth babies, or whether it is the energy associated with creating art or business or communication, in terms of like just having like an impassioned point of view, whatever you're creating, putting out into the world, it is sourced from this energy center. And so it's a very sacred center. However, so many people have been shamed or judged or shut down around their sexuality because of a lot of trauma that they existed or that they experienced, whether it is like big T trauma, or is it just through moving throughout this world and religion and government and family and media that has really created a taboo association with their sexuality, which is why in esoeroticism we don't deal with intercourse or partnership or orgasm or anything like that, because that can be really sensitive and shut a lot of people off to their sexual energy. We're offering a completely different perspective, which is your sexual energy is beyond intercourse. It's something that is your divine right and a magical energy within yourself to access. And so if you are shut down in this area of your body and in this energetic association, you're shut down in your personal power, and you're not good at all the things that we spoke about before. And so, yeah, I call it like our cauldron of power. And for me, we do dance and movement, which, I think that's pretty obvious how this integrates into dance and movement. We have a very sensual serpentine style movement that activates from the sacral energy center. However, what I don't see a lot of people talking about is like in the witchcraft and magical communities, of how like you should be activated in this energy center when you're stepping into ritual space or ceremony or casting a spell, because if it's your center of creation, it's going to be that energetic activation in whatever magical or mystical working you're doing that's going to make it so much more potent and powerful.
Yes.
Right? Yes, and then
That's that.
Yes, and like learning how to use this energy, of course, in not just your mystical magical practices, but then we always integrate it with greater dark feminine practices as well. So for me, we call ourselves dark feminine devotees. The spirit world is absolutely an aspect of the dark feminine. So it's so aligned with your audience of paranormal uh, aficionados and
Wiki babes and weirdos.
yes, because the dark feminine. So for me, sexuality is like you have to access that as one of the most potent energies within the dark feminine. And with other energies that you consider when I say dark feminine, because we use all of this in our esoerotic witchcraft, it's the shadow. It is magic and occulted wisdom. It is the spirit world. It's the unseen. As well as we always talk about its boundaries and death and necessary endings. It is a very core component of ourselves, the dark feminine. And yet, so many people feel like it is an aspect of themselves that they should be ashamed of, or that is evil or bad, when really the dark feminine is just energies within the feminine that have been deemed taboo by greater society, whereas the light feminine are aspects of the feminine that are embraced by greater society. That's the way you can really think about it. It's the hidden aspects of ourselves that have to kind of go underground, but that where our true power lies.
Yes,
And
which
so
is why we love shadow work so much.
it's why, like, we have a virtual online platform and membership called the Minx and Muse Multiverse, and we do dance and movement in that to cultivate our esoerotic energy, but we also do a lot of additional magical and dark feminine practices to then harness that energy in certain directions. So yes, a lot of shadow work, connecting with spirits, working with our energy, doing spell work, learning about mysticism and magic and witchcraft, talking even like discussions around like, hey, like setting personal boundaries and knowing when it's time to walk away from things, honoring cycles.
Yes, which is so huge. And I also, God, I have like so many things that are coming up as you're talking that I'm like, I want to talk about all of these things. But um, because I know we have a lot of people who listen to this that, yes, are women, but also men. I think it's important to differentiate that, like, when we're talking about things like the masculine, the feminine, it's more so referring to like the duality of those energies that is within everybody. This is not necessarily like gendered terms. So I'm curious if you can also just talk a bit more about like the masculine energies and the versus the feminine energies and what those look like and the duality. And of course, yeah, we love both, we need both to do things, but just kind of talking about those differences.
Absolutely. We always like to make sure that, yes, and I kind of forget sometimes and just assume that people know, and I'm sure most people listening know that masculine and feminine energy exists within all gendered bodies. It's not a gender identification thing, it is an energy. And so think of like the yin and the yang. So the yin, that is the dark part of the yin and yang, and that's the feminine. And then the yang is that lightness, that's the masculine. In tarot, you can think about the feminine is the moon card, the masculine is the sun card. And so you can think about the masculine as the conscious, it's the outward taking action, it's the logical, whereas the feminine is the internal, it's the intuition and feeling body, it is the subconscious,
Hmm.
it's receptive energy.
Yes, which speaking of the subconscious, you know how big a fan I am of this. So I don't think I've talked about any subconscious stuff on here at all. So can you go a bit more in depth with us in terms of talking about the subconscious and how all of that works? And, you know, a lot of the work that we do at Minx and in the multiverse is really rooted in, and dance, the dance work and esoeroticism is rooted in helping us to reprogram those things. So uh give us the details on the subconscious.
Oh, let's spill the tea. Yes. Well, I always refer to the magical axiom as is above, so is below, as is within, so is without. So, as we believe in our subconscious internal world, so we see reflected in our external reality. And so, we may consciously have a desire for something. Let's use an example of, well, let's use sexuality for an example. Hell, let's make it esoerotic. So you may say, oh, I claim my sexuality for myself. I am empowered with my sexuality. You could be listening to this podcast and be like, you know what? I'm claiming that part of myself. I choose to step into this power. This sounds like this is going to make me a much more effective and potent witch. But, and also sexual energy is healing energy. So I feel like I gloss over that sometimes, but it is also a very healing energy. You may consciously desire that and speak that, but if your subconscious has different program, that's going to be your actual reality and belief system and energetic space from which you operate. So, this is why we have to do work that allows us to access the subconscious mind, because I think we can all agree that our subconscious mind, however long you've been alive, moving through this earthly realm, has been programmed in one way or another to think, oh, our sexuality, that is something that is unsafe for me to express, or it is something that will get me judged. It's something that I should feel great shame around. It's something that is reserved for a partner or for procreation. We all have been bombarded with these messages since we've been born. And so we can have a really unhealthy relationship with our sexuality and fear it, understandably. So despite maybe listening to this podcast and saying, oh, okay, I see how this energy is actually like my creativity and my life force and my magnetism, not just something that is like pornography or reserved for, orgasm with myself or a partner or whatever. Making literal human babies, whatever. So we have to, once we have that conscious will or desire, we then have to do the subconscious work to change that programming so that that is actually the truth running our reality as opposed to the contrary. So we see this in magical practices all the time where they do different techniques to get into to contact their subconscious state. So techniques like drumming, chanting, um, deep states of meditation, hypnosis. This is why orgasm works in sex magic. But all of these different states allow us to bypass the conscious mind and enter into the subconscious, which at point as witches, magicians, mystical practitioners, we can implant a new intention. And so we don't have to go into it, but we use a technique called Esoerotic gnosis. And it's a way that we guide people into bypassing the conscious mind to connect with the subconscious mind through esoerotic dance and movement. And it's, how we set up the movement guidance and the spaces we create around it. And it's within this state of esoerotic gnosis, we are then able to intentionally reprogram the subconscious mind with our higher belief. In our case, I reclaim my sexual sovereignty.
Mhm.
Times, people will like want to read a book or listen to a podcast or even like dress a certain way or perform a certain way. And that's not the magic. That information is really powerful, but it's how you embody that information and how you integrate that information. And truly, how do we get it into our subconscious so that we are overriding these old programs? And so this is like where having understanding magic at a greater level can be really beneficial, because I think sometimes we think as witches like, oh, I'll just like light this colored candle and everything will fall into place. And that's, resonance is an important thing, and color correspondences can help, but the greater work really happens, to in my experience, when we combine that with embodiment practices.
Yes, and I think it's so important to talk about this because I don't think uh, okay, well, I will speak for myself. I definitely did not fully understand how much our subconscious is actually controlling until I started I'm doing this like certification program right now that deals a lot with like subconscious reprogramming and rooting out these old like woundings and beliefs. Um, but the majority of the way that we operate in our lives, the majority of our thoughts, the majority of our reactions, the majority of the actions that we are taking, that is all really dictated by our subconscious. And so those are things, subconscious, right? Where it's kind of the autopilot, like the things that we are doing unconsciously. We're not sitting there like thinking about how we're gonna do these things. It's like breathing. It just happens. And so if we have these old limiting beliefs and woundings and fears and whatever that are, the shame, the judgment that's kind of floating around in our subconscious, like that is controlling the majority of the way that we are showing up in our lives. And something that you talk about a lot, which I mean, granted, like pretty much everything you've said ever has had a huge impact on me. But one of the biggest things I think is when you talk about, people asking, like, oh, what's like a more advanced spell that I can do, or like complicated spell or ritual or whatever. I want the like big kid witch stuff. I'm not a baby witch anymore, whatever. Right. But you're like the most, what is it? It's like living your life intentionally, so can you talk a bit more on that and like your thoughts on that and how really all of the subconscious stuff and how that really is affecting and impacting and just being able to show up in our normal everyday lives and the normal mundane things that we're doing.
I love that you remembered that conversation. Sponge. Yes, I know people always, and I think this is human nature, and this is the masculine, right? Where it's like linear. Masculine is very linear, the feminine is very non-linear. And so the masculine can always say, what's next? How can I achieve at a greater level from a technicality perspective?
Mhm.
Whereas the feminine's always going to go, how can I go deeper and deeper and deeper into the depths and have a greater understanding from an internal and an expansive perspective? And in this instance, you can do the most complicated spell. You can call on all the different spirits. You can have all of your correspondences lined up with the lunar phases and all of that. And even like high level, because I take high level ceremonial magical classes and programs, and they'll say the same thing. You can actually call upon like a very high like angelic energy or demon energy, but there's free will is always going to be the baseline. And so if you're not the one following through, they can't they can't like do the work for you ultimately. And so
Mhm.
this brings it back to shadow work. I love that you do shadow work in, not just personally, but even in like your business programs and whatnot, because that is a way to uncover what are our subconscious programs. When you
Mhm.
start doing the shadow work and realize, oh my goodness, I totally didn't realize I have this belief around whatever it is that's really running the show versus like my conscious desire for the contrary.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so what happens over time is that as you continue to do this shadow work and as you continue to deepen your intuition and your subconscious and your magical alignment in the world, the greater magic you can do is literally lift.
Mm-hmm.
So many people want to do the mental work, the masculine, but they don't want to do the embodiment work, the feminine.
Yep.
Yeah. So that means like, you see people who have so much occult wisdom. They could list off anything from, ancient practices, a list of herbs, associations, crystals, whatever. They could understand very obscure biblical references, whatever, but they're still not understanding the foundations of magic and going out into the world and flipping people off, not
Mm-hmm.
managing their own emotions, not processing their own emotions, not choosing healthy steps going into the world. Our magic is meant to support us in our earthly pursuits. We have to remember in magic, like attracts like, what we resist persists.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are going out in the world with an energy of anger and vitriol, like attracts like, you will attract anger and vitriol. If you are staunchly anti something and constantly, I hate this, I'm anti this, whatever, what we resist persists. So we're just energetically putting more of that into the world. So another way to look at that is instead of being anti things, be pro things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm for this, like attracts like.
Mm-hmm.
What be the energy that you want to see in the world?
Yeah. I
This
feel like, oh, keep going.
No, I was just gonna like end it saying like this is what you were referring to when I said live it. The most powerful spell you can do is take all these magic you do and live it and integrate it into your life with intention and not just relegate that wisdom to some kind of like circle space or ritual space.
Yes. And it's so interesting, like talking about all of those examples, and I know you talk a lot about like it's the difference between understanding something versus having an understanding of it, which I love so much, and it's so true. But exactly like what you're talking about, I feel like it's kind of that like emotional bypassing, if you will, right? And it's exactly why I always think of like relationships, right? And how people will always attract like the same type of person, right? And they're like, oh my God, I always get these guys that are just like they love bomb me and then they ghost. And I don't know what I'm doing to make this happen, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, well, like, let's look at what you're putting out there. And, like, have you actually looked at these patterns? Have you done the shadow work to figure out where that is coming from and why you are attracting these people and like why you're accepting this kind of, and allowing this kind of behavior, and not to get into like I'm not getting into like victim blaming territory or anything, but it's like really like getting in there and just analyzing the patterns, because I'm a big fan of like stoicism, the stoic approach, right? And like Ryan Holiday, all that jazz. But like the only thing that we have control over is ourselves. We cannot control other people and their perceptions of us and their thoughts and their feelings and their reactions. We have zero control over any of that. The only thing we have control over is ourselves and our thoughts and our beliefs and our actions and our reactions. So like, yes, that is what we need to be looking at. And oh my God, Crimson, I have to go back and like find this video. I was on TikTok last night and there was some girl, she did this video talking about like a breakup and whatever, and she's like, but just be a witch. You don't have to feel your feelings. You just do a spell for it. Just be a witch, and I was like, oh my God, Crimson, would like have a field day with this. You need to do a reaction video on it. But yeah, I feel like a lot of people, it's kind of like the mall witches, right? Like we've talked about that with Damien's term.
I love the mall witch term, and I have adopted that also.
Yeah, because it's like, yeah, sure, we can go get, I guess, like get a spell book and do what's in there, but also like the actual work is what we're talking about, and reprogramming all of this stuff and like being able to actually identify it.
Right. And also, you touched on a really great thing. I'm glad you brought that up because part of the work is also processing what you need to process. So, there is no way that, say, you're going to experience grief from a breakup and just to be able to be like, I'm a witch, I'm going to do a spell to not feel grief. That is not how energy works, and emotions are energy, so it's not how emotions and energy work. And what we do at Minx and Muse is we actually have classes where we process old emotions and energy, because whether you want to feel it in that moment or not, that's staying in your body till it's allowed to express. And you will, when people start our classes, a lot of times they'll start crying or having this rage or what an emotion come out of nowhere, and they're like, what is happening to my body right now? Oh, you're moving your body in a way right now that we're guiding you through that's actually allowing you to access old emotions that you're finally able to just express and release instead of shoving them down. We are totally not advocates for bypassing emotions. We are advocates of integrating your emotions by feeling them and letting them flow through. And in this way, you don't stay in that state of grief or rage. You allow yourself to experience in the moment and move it through. So it's not a form of toxic positivity when I say like attracts like, what you resist persists. So don't ever be sad or mad. You will be sad and mad energetically, whether you consciously want to admit it or not, if you don't allow yourself to feel it and process it in your body. So this is another somatic feminine practice.
Yes, and I feel like also just to note, in case anybody is like, "Well, I don't know, like, where'd you get this information from?" Like, just noting, like, go read the book, The Body Keeps the Score. This is not like we're not just talking out of our asses here. Like, this is literally, it is studied. Like, this is how the body works. Like, it does physically hold these emotions. And like, I am saying this as someone who doesn't really like feelings and emotions. Okay. Hence why I go to Minx and Muse so I can deal with these things and also have a therapist. But anyway, like that it's true. That is it's how the body works. It's storing these things. So this is not just like, oh well, this is, how I think things should be. And so we're gonna do it this way. Like this is factual.
Oh my gosh. And I've taught a series called Intro to Esoeroticism for years now. And when I first started, I would say, I know some people think this is pseudoscience, but we do store old emotions and energies in our body. And we've had so many therapists take the class at this point who have stepped in and said, it's not pseudoscience, Crimson. This has been proven over and over again. So it's so much so that it's something that I integrate into my therapy practice. And it's worth mentioning, I know some people really do like the scientific proof, and so I love that you brought that book up, The Body Keeps Score. There's just been so many studies around this that it's unquestionable now. And also, if you're interested in the gnosis that we talked about before and accessing the subconscious mind, simply look into neuroplasticity scientifically. So there's a lot around that. It's why a lot of techniques like NLP or EMDR or hypnosis work, because
Mhm.
there are forms of neuroplasticity that allow you to access the subconscious brainwave state.
Yes. So there you go. People, it is science. Okay. We are not just making things up.
Always,
But
like the ancient priestesses and magi and witches have known this for millennia. But finally, science in the 20th and 21st century are finally picking up on it.
Yeah, that's like my hope with paranormal stuff too, is eventually one day maybe, science will catch up with us. But something I also want to talk about, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Uh, I know a lot of people have weird connotations with witches and witchcraft because, Hollywood, right? But also, especially the whole like black magic or dark magic and thinking about those things, when in reality they might be talking about something else. So I would love for you to talk a little bit more about your thoughts in terms of what being a witch actually is, and also what black and dark magic, what that actually means.
Oh, thank you for allowing me to chat on this because I'm passionate about it. So in terms of which is a non-dogmatic system, a spiritual system. And so there is no higher council of witches who determines what witches believe and don't believe and get to dictate what it means to be a witch and how you practice, which is wonderful for us who are trying to escape oppressive dogmatic systems. You can be Christian and be a witch. You can be an atheist and be a witch. There's no prerequisite other than you wanting to step into that identification. Now, I will say that there are probably uniting factors of people who would be interested in becoming a witch. And I do invite people to define witchcraft on their own terms. I like to define witchcraft as someone living fully in their power, using energy to manifest the world around them. And so this is why I embrace cycles. I embrace nature. I believe in the spirit world and work with the spirit world because that's working with energy, right? This is why also living fully in one's power, I do believe you're not living fully in your power if you're cut off from your sexual energy. So that is like a further definition that I align with. But keep in mind, you don't have to believe what your friend who's a witch also believes. I believe it's a very sovereign practice where it's meant to be. I do believe it's meant to have an inherent connection with nature. I do believe that because I believe that's like where greater spirit lies, right? So there is like that pagan connection. I believe in working with the moon phases and the seasons and all of that, just because that is like another energy, right? But we're not giving our power to a single source, a single God, and dismissing everything else as just part of his creation, that we have to submit to. I think that's a kind of uniting a difference. But so yes, I encourage you, don't feel like you have to follow someone else's version of witchcraft. Be eclectic. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. Do your own investigations to see, because what works for one person may not work for you. You may be a hedge witch, meaning that you connect with spirits from the other side. I have a sense that we have a lot of hedge witches in the community. But also there's kitchen witches or green witches, there's ancestral witches, there's folk magic witches, there are ceremonial magician witches. So nature witches, whatever. So don't feel like a lot. If you need some kind of structured system, Wicca is a religious system within witchcraft. So all Wiccans are witches, but not all witches are Wiccans. That's the way that you can think about it. So some people do really like having a religious structure. They just want it to not be monotheistic. And so check out Wicca, but don't think that you have to join a Wiccan coven to identify as a witch. That's not true. And even the Wiccans would say that. So all that being said, living fully in your power means embracing the duality of the lightness and the dark. And so that's the feminine and the masculine. That's the conscious and the subconscious, the sun and the moon. We know. And so what I feel like has been really demonized within magic and witchcraft is the use of the words black and dark. That's black magic and that's white magic. And you'll see people say, I'm a white witch, trying to express some kind of moral superiority. But here's the thing. At its core, white magic or light magic is that which is done to attract things, working with the benefic planets of Jupiter and Venus when you're calling in. Black magic, dark magic is, as you could imagine, releasing, pushing away, working with the planets Mars and Saturn. It's also working with the subconscious. So if you say, oh, I'm a white witch, but you've done a burning ritual, you in fact are practicing black magic. And let me tell you why I'm so high on my horse about this, because I'm tired of demonizing the darkness and black. And that has to do with our magic and the dark feminine, as well as like our melanated brothers and sisters who also, we don't even realize the subconscious is so powerful that if you just create the association that darkness or black is bad and whiteness and lightness is good, you are subconsciously putting out to the world a very inaccurate form of association, even with our skin color. And so if you're meaning bad, use the word baneful. Use the word unhealthy. Use the word nefarious. And so and we're all working on this. I'm sure I have fallen into this because it's so easy to say, oh, that's the dark arts. And it's like, well, this working with the spirits is the dark arts because it's working in the shadow and the unknown. So pretty much anyone listening to this who works with spirits, you are doing dark witchcraft. You are embracing the dark feminine, but that's not bad. That's just working with the unseen or the occulted or the esoteric, or that's what has been deemed taboo. It's up to you, circling back to your free will, is if you choose to operate within that as being a healthy expression or being baneful, because you can be nefarious or baneful in white magic too. What if you are trying to like control someone else's energy or tapping into other people's energy field, even if you're trying to, but I'm trying to like do this thing that's I think is for the best for them. Well, what if their free will disagrees? Anytime you're trying to do a love spell for a specific person, it can be argued that that's a bit nefarious because that is against someone's free will, even though you may think, no, like it's love. There's complications to this, and there's deeper discussions. And I'm like a very anti-cancel culture or calling people out for being ignorant type of person. I just like to share like a different way to think about things so that we can more consciously use our languaging, because abracadabra, so I speak, so as I speak, so I create. We just want to be conscious of like, hey, are we unintentionally like assigning bad to anything that's not white or light? If that's toxic positivity in and of itself too. So
which we're not here for. We're not fans of.
No.
So thank you for talking about all of that and sharing that, because I totally agree. And I just think a lot of these things, we've been given these like connotations and associations with things based on pop culture, basically, and what movies are showing and books, and whatever. Yeah, exactly. So it's, it's just it's this kind of like societal, I don't know, norms, expectations, connotations, whatever, that people are kind of pushing on it. And I feel like, especially people who aren't necessarily in the witchy community, they might potentially still be holding on to some of those things or looking at it as like, oh, what are you doing? You know, or still having the association that like, oh, you're a witch, you worship the devil, you know, like so many of those old things where it's like, well, you might want to just like talk to the person first because I mean, like maybe, but also maybe not, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I think the world is opening up to understanding that that is something that perhaps has been fed to us as like a way to sell movie tickets or a way to like live in a fear state so that you will adhere to a specific religion. Because here's the thing, you're not going to be going to a specific, and I'm not anti-religion, I just personally am not religious. I think to each their own. I respect everyone's spiritual practice, but something to consider is that you're not going to go necessarily and give your money to a specific church or temple or whatever in order to connect with God if you realize you can connect with God outside. And back in the olden days, they realized this, and so that's why paganism was outlawed. You know, these are the crusades, these are the times where like people were taught to fear anything that was not specifically Christianity, you know. And that has been passed down in our ancestral lineage, and this belief that like a lot of it also, Nicole, is like we understand that we hold the energy of our ancestors, and if they lived during the witch trials, we have that witch wound of like it's unsafe to
Mm.
practice divination. Like it's unsafe to use nature to connect to spirit. It's dangerous to talk with spirits when it's like our spirits are here to protect and guide us if we know how to consciously work with them. And so I disagree with that programming that you get from a lot of religious voices. And I think there is still a way to practice witchcraft within like a religious belief system at the same time. I don't see why they have to necessarily oppose each other if that's your cup of tea.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because as we talked about before, a lot of these things that we're doing, witchcraft, wow, it's actually like proven by science. So, you know what I'm saying? Like it can be a both and situation.
And I've literally never met a witch who has like eaten a baby or like done any of this crazy ass shit. That's like, these are the actions of like, and I think it's also, we need to be really clear that like witchcraft is very different from like cultural folk or ancient traditions around spirit or shamanism or anything like that. Like they're not one and the same. And some people will like say, oh, the witches talking about some ancient culture that did used to sacrifice babies. And there are current cultures that sacrifice animals because it's life force for life force. You know, we've talked about that, you know, offline before, but so you don't, it's, that's why I don't like lumping witch into like, you all have to have the exact same beliefs and intentions. And so most of the witches, I mean, they're like that I know are the most open-minded, kind, and thoughtful, but magically inclined, sovereign people. They have just made the decision that I'm no longer going to be a victim of my circumstances. I want to be the energy that controls the energy. I want to be the ultimate creatrix of my life. And I'm going to use these forces that exist outside of myself, which I see not just in perhaps one God, but in a world of magic around me, and they choose to step into that power. And so I see witches as a very empowering, conscious, and very beautiful group of people.
Yes. Snaps for that. I feel like that just like summed it up so good. And I mean, that's what I prescribe to as well. Although, you know, shocking since I go to Minx and love you and learn from you. So,
I
uh,
learned so much from you too about, you know, because you're way more sensitive to the spirit world, and you've taught me so much when it comes to that. Because, you know, and I love that you bring a consciousness into the ghost world and a more feminine perspective versus like if it's not registered on this machine, it's not real. You're like, no, but like I feel it and I experience it. And it's like, why?
Well, thank you for that. I know we are almost at an hour. Geez, I literally wish I could just sit here and talk to you all day. But I want to wrap things up by talking about, I know you are doing something super fun and exciting on the 20th of this month. And for everybody who's listening, June 20th, 2024 is what we were talking about. Although I think afterwards you might put it like people might still be able to get the replay, but I would love for you to talk about what is going on and what you're doing and the multiverse and where people can find you. And I will, everything that she talks about, I will link down below this episode, and I will also post it on the RGO Instagram. So it will be easily accessible.
Thank you. And I'll keep it quick because no one likes these, plugged salesy promos. So just real quick, yes. June 20th, it's a Thursday night. I'm doing a workshop. It's a virtual workshop. It's free. It's called Awaken Your Power, Pleasure, and Potential Through Esoerotic Witchcraft. It's really like for those who are like, tell me more. And if you hear this after, just send me an email. I'll send you the replay. It's totally okay. But then from that, we're also doing like a 2-week window to join our virtual community, the Minx and Muse Multiverse, which is like a virtual studio of Esoerotic witches with classes, lunar rituals, workshops, workbook, all this stuff. And we are going to be doing like a launch of that per se and a special around that. But you can, even if you miss that, you can join our virtual community anytime. We'd love to have you for anyone who's interested. So yes, you can put all the links in the things, but if you'd like to find us, minxandmuse.com and then minx.muse on Instagram.
Yay! Yeah, come join. I mean, well, come to the class, but also just come join Multiverse and hang out with me and hang out with Crimson and anybody who like literally anything in this conversation. If it was resonating with you and you're like, hell yeah to that, just come join us. Just get your butt in there. Come join us. Come hang out. But thank you so much, Crimson, for taking the time and chatting and sharing all of your amazing knowledge and wisdom with us. I am so glad that we finally got to do this and have an episode sharing all about it. And I'm just so honored always to be able to chat with you.
The feeling is mutual. I love you. I love the work you do in the world. I love your Real Ghost of community. So thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Yay, I love you too. And thank you guys for coming to hang out. I hope you like this episode. Come join Minx and Muse, join the multiverse.
Bye.
Okay, bye.